Hey, good evening, everybody. My name's Sean Luz. I'm Sustainability Coordinator for the City of Framingham. I'm joined here by Frank Nicashian from Ashland, as well as Casey Bolduc from Ace Solar, and Colby from Ace Solar as well. So we're just going to give it a couple minutes. We'll get into more formal introductions, and we'll probably start around 7:05, but I'll check in with you in just a few moments. Thanks. Hey everyone, just a quick follow-up for those that may have joined recently. We're going to be starting in just a few minutes. So if you want to hang tight, I will be following up shortly. Thank you. All right. Looks like we should be ready to go. Firstly, I want to thank everyone in attendance tonight. And I'll be talking with a lot of you further on in the presentation when we get to the Q&A. But for now, I would like to turn it over to Frank Nicashian, Sustainability Coordinator for the town of Ashland. Thanks, Frank.
Hey, thanks, Sean. I want to thank everyone listening today. I also want to thank Sean for being the organizer of this presentation, and Colby and Casey from Ace Solar for also taking time out of their day to talk to everyone in this call about solar. So first off, I wanted to give a quick intro on the program that the four towns are running. So Metrowest Solar Plus Clean Heat Challenge, it's an initiative that's sponsored by the towns of Natick, Ashland, Holliston, City of Framingham. And the project got started because staff and sustainability committee members from these four communities wanted to explore ways of how to promote creatively clean energy technologies of solar and heat pumps for heating and cooling residential and small scale commercial homes and buildings. And we found that there were a few programs that the state ran and passed called the Mass Clean Energy Center's Heat Smart and Solarize programs, where it was modeled after working with competitively selected installers of those clean energy systems, working in conjunction with volunteers and municipal staff to help basically run an education campaign talking about why those these opportunities for clean energy technology adoptions are good fits and how you can save money doing it. And this program, Metrowest Solar Plus Clean Heat Challenge, it's actually the four communities doing this program without the state's involvement, just because there was we wanted the autonomy to run it and the state actually isn't doing specific sponsor programs here. So essentially how it works is volunteers from each community, in addition to the vendors and municipal staff, help to promote each clean energy of solar, ground source heat pumps and air source heat pumps for residents. And we were able to secure pricing that's very competitive compared to market rate from just the state averages as another way to incentivize adoption. And ACE will get into this, but there's also discount once a threshold of kilowatt of the systems combined in all 4 communities with ACE's reach. So that's also another cool part of the program. And another basis of the program was each of the 4 communities of Ashland, Holliston, Natick, and Framingham are green communities, and each of them has adopted a net zero resolution in line with the state's climate goals, or actually trying to meet those targets earlier than the state's goal of 2050. So there's the goal of the towns to help meet those emissions targets, and finding creative ways to go about those. So next slide, please. So how to participate in the program? If you go to metrowestcleanenergy.com, people on this call have probably seen the website, but if you have not, you can go into the website and click on the sign up button to enter in information on which clean energy technology you're interested in, of solar, air source heat pumps, or ground source heat pumps, or all 3 if you really want to get more information. And you can sign up for a site assessment for free at no cost, where ACE Solar, New England Ductless, which is the air source vendor we're partnering with, or Achieve Renewable Energy, the ground source company we're partnering with, will be in touch with you to set up the site visit and then give you a proposal for those systems. And in addition, if you're interested in volunteering to help out, you can also find out information by clicking on the, I believe it's the About or the Sign Up button. There should be a tab for volunteers, and some of the tasks that the volunteers helped out with was doing clean energy open houses, where people can actually help describe to other residents on what solar is, what heat pumps are, if that volunteer already has installed a solar system, for instance, in addition to events where you can help out tabling at a farmer's market or other type of in-person outreach. All right, next slide, please. So here are the municipal contacts. These are the sort of the project managers that are staff contacts at each of the 4 communities. In Framingham, it is Sean Luz. He's their sustainability coordinator. You've met him kicking off this meeting today. In Holliston, it's Matt Zedek, who's their sustainability consultant. In Natick, it's Julian Wilson Martin, the sustainability director. And my name is Frank Nakashian. I'm the sustainability coordinator for Ashland. So if you are in any of the 4 towns, please reach out to any of those, any of these four of us for specific questions on the program, or if you just want to learn more.
Awesome. Thank you, Frank. And actually, just on a quick logistical note, I completely failed to mention in the beginning of the presentation that if anyone has any questions during the presentation, anything about solar, maybe about ACE Solar, who's our installer, who's going to be presenting today, feel free to add them to the chat, as well as there should be a Q&A function. But either way, I'll be monitoring those during the presentation, and we might have a chance to answer them during the presentation or at the Q&A at the end. So I'll turn it over to Casey and Colby from ACE Solar.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Frank, for the introductions. As I mentioned, let me actually start by sharing my screen. So we are ACE Solar, the chosen, vetted and chosen installer for the solar and PV program, PV solar and battery program as part of this Clean Heat Challenge, which is great to see these 4 towns coming together, and we're very honored and proud to have been chosen to be part of this, and real excited to show you a little bit about how it all works. Again, answer any questions as well, but I'll jump right into it. So usually when, if you Google solar systems at all, usually this is what pops up. And maybe I Google solar systems more often than most people, but common sight. But in actuality, what we're really talking about is this here. PV solar can be installed in a lot of places. We'll get into the wheres, but really what it comes down to is being able to take advantage of the sun. It's not going anywhere quite for some time. So the ability to kind of harness that power and turn it into energy that you can use at your home or business. It's kind of the name of the game here. Just kind of highlight some of the main components of the system. You see the panels on the roof here with a nice view of the background as well. In the middle, on the top here, I'm going to give it to my mouse, but we have the inverter. It's kind of the central hub of the system. A couple of different variations of this, but again, we'll get into that later. You have your meters down below. You see this is the vacancy 4.1, and then on the real bottom, the National Grid smart meter. And then some safety components as well. You see the shutdown in the middle. And then on the right, kind of where all the magic happens for you, the monitoring portal, which is available for any system that you purchase or own, or have a PPA, I should say. You have the ability to monitor the production of your system either from your smartphone or on the web. Gives you a lot of details. This is just a quick snapshot showing how much production you've had this month. You can break it down by day, down by week. It gets pretty granular there. And then you really go to the next level and add in kind of connect your utility account, add in the billing information there, and it gives a good comparison of what you've used on a monthly basis compared to what you've generated. There. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Colby Lawless, who's going to talk a little bit more about the specifics here.
Thank you, Casey. So yep, that's the solar system we're going to be talking about today. How it really works. We know that solar panels are converting sunlight into energy. It's not about heat, it's just about the sun. So even in the cold, they're going to be generating electricity. And the light is measured in photons. These are particles of light, and they are knocking electrons free from atoms. That's what's making electricity. And as Casey had mentioned, there's something called the inverter. This is kind of the brain behind a solar system. It converts direct current, which is what the panels generate, into alternating current, which is then used for your home or business. So what happens, this is probably one of the biggest questions we get about solar. What about when it's cloudy, and what about at night? So there's still sunlight coming through clouds. So your solar panels and your solar system will generate electricity. It's not as much as it would produce on a very sunny day, but you'll still be getting production. As far as nighttime, there's really no photons. Unfortunately, the moon doesn't help us out. So it's just going to be you're not going to be getting electricity at that point from your panels, but you will be connected to the grid. And there are a few ways we go about dealing with this. There's net metering, which I'll get into, and then there's also batteries. So net metering is a great policy that's available in a lot of different states, but especially Massachusetts. This is when your panels will actually produce more energy than you end up using during the day. And it's actually going to get sent back to the grid, and you get compensated for it on your electric bill in the form of credits. So at night, even though you're not producing your own solar energy, you kind of have these savings of credits that can then be applied. Solar incentives, that's one of the great incentives we have. Net metering we have covered. There's the 26% tax credit available. This is available until 2022. So this is really great. You can claim 26% the cost of your solar system. And, it gets a little nitty and gritty with taxes, and we're not tax professionals, so I won't go into it too much, but essentially the tax credit is really good and beneficial for you. The SMART program is a program specifically for Massachusetts. It's one of the best solar incentives in the country. And this program, when you purchase a solar system, you get all these benefits, not when you lease or get a PPA, but when you own the system yourself, you get a contract with the SMART program, and they're going to end up paying you for 10 years. So it's based on how much you produce. They will set a price, and you'll get a check in the mail. And then lastly, there's the Massachusetts tax credit. That's up to $1,000 rebate. So types of solar systems, we have all different ones. Rooftop is probably going to be the most common for the Metrowest program. It just goes right on top of your roof. We also have ground mount systems if maybe the roof wasn't an option for you. A lot of people have these in their backyards. When farms go solar, oftentimes they'll use ground mounts. So we see those a lot as well. Carports and canopies, solar panels over parking lots or driveways. These are a little less common and we're not going to see them too much in this program. They do have a lot of added costs to installation, but it is something that we have experience in and do. And then lastly, we just have flat roof installation. So buildings with flat roofs, we can still install panels. So I think we have some examples coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of add some other points there as well. I mean, with the carports and canopies, there's a good and a bad, but just like anything really. The carport, it's a nice in concept, right? Add a little shade on the driveway, some covered carport, right, for a parking area, something along those lines. Really, the cost comes with the structure that you're building to support the panels, right? In a situation where if there's already an existing structure, then obviously we can analyze the weight that could take and see what can be installed on an existing structure. But really, yeah, the added cost comes in with building something, to really hold that weight, I should say. I'm going to skip ahead one. While we're on that subject, so one way we were able to kind of mitigate those costs of having, kind of the metal traditional carport structure was using timber piles. So your telephone poles you can see on the side of the roads. That has, really cut down the cost of the builds. Ultimately, you're not building the steel structure at the time. Can't really speak for right now with the way wood has gone, but at the time, steel was obviously more expensive. So going this route again gave them the ability to take advantage of the savings and the energy from the solar without a really overwhelming cost on the structure end. So some other carports, bounce around these pictures a little bit, but another example. So I'm going to double check the location on this because it might be actually local, but the idea here, the carport structures, providing shade for those underneath. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who actually owns a parking lot and tried to talk him into it, but I think I'm going to start only going to businesses that have this, because why wouldn't you want to park under the nice shaded area? And it's doing good for the environment as well. So some other examples. So I mentioned that the traditional sort of rooftop system. This is one actually right in North Andover in our backyard. A couple different roof planes on the back. These are penetrating roof mounts. So these with a traditional asphalt shingle, doing the research to find the rafters. It's putting holes in there. They are sealed. So obviously we're doing the research ahead of time with site visits to make sure we identify where those rafters are. So we're drilling those holes. We're only doing it once. And those are filled with compound, and the flashing actually secures that around as well with the shingles laying on top. So it doesn't create anything creating a leak or anything of that nature. Let's see here. So speaking of rooftops, this is a flat roof. So with this, these are just kind of traditionally, this is a penetrating roof mount. So something that's actually physically secured to the rooftop. Obviously much more secure. Probably most common where there aren't a lot of the wind barriers. So nature rears its ugly head and throws a storm at it, then there's some protection holding it down. There's also ballasted systems. So this is actually one, the Riverwalk properties in Lawrence, which have these ballasted systems. And if you can see, if my cursor is showing up again, the cement blocks kind of on the lower part left of the panels anyways. So these are really just weighted down, with enough weight, obviously engineering done to hold everything in place. It eliminates the need to penetrate through the roof and causing any additional holes. And then as for ground mounts as well, Colby mentioned having it in the backyard. In the image, there's a kind of the solar trackers, which you see some places. They're don't have a lot of those. There's a lot of moving mechanical parts and things that can go wrong in that scenario. So we haven't done a lot of those, but you know, kind of more traditional ground mount system, something like this. This one's in the shade at the moment, so it's not you know, doing all that it can. But even in this moment, as Colby mentioned, it is generating energy, however little it may be. But yeah, again, this is something where, you know, up against the edge of property lines, you know, if you don't have the roof space, or if you have a kind of, I don't want to say complicated, but a small, not a large enough space for more panels, you know, it'd be opportunistic to look at a ground mount. I'll say with that, there are the added costs of trenching, basically to get the conduit and cables out to the wherever the array is. But again, it's a good opportunity to take advantage of some space that you might not be using otherwise. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Colby.
So why is solar good for the environment? Why are we doing this? It's a zero emission energy source. So as long as it's producing energy, it's not emitting anything. And that reduces air pollution from other sources, and it reduces groundwater contamination or oil spills. You know, you're really mitigating that. You're not using energy produced from those things. It's very multi-use, as we just showed you. So it can go on top of roofs, but it can also go over places like parking lots, covered landfills, places that other energy sources, you can't just throw like an oil refinery somewhere. And lastly, they're made of completely recyclable materials. But as Casey was talking about, with moving parts, things can go wrong. And typically solar panels don't have any moving parts. So this is why they really last a long time, which is great. And continuing on the environment. So this screenshot on the far left, that's part of the monitoring system that you would get, the Solar Edge app. And this shows your production and how much you personally are saving when you go solar. So it's a lot of pounds of CO2 that would otherwise be emitted into the atmosphere. It's like planting thousands of acres of forest, taking cars off the road. So, you know, if you ever wonder how much it does, it really does make a difference.
Sorry, I didn't move forward on purpose. I was going to make a point. Yeah, seeing this year-over-year comparison is great as well. Just going back to the Solar Edge monitoring, the environmental benefits is obviously nice to see. And there's a couple different kind of variations on that I've seen, which are pretty entertaining. But you know, again, this system had been installed for a few years, really. You know, not without its ups and downs. You see some, you know, variations in the production, but overall, like with this app, you're able to see that kind of month to month, identifying, you know, it's better than we anticipated, which does happen quite a bit. If there's anything kind of off track, right? If the shading has changed, you know, trees don't grow overnight, certainly, but you know, if anything along those lines have changed. So, anyways, always hard fun to monitor. I always check the production of your system, just kind of see that how things are going. And I'm going to throw it back to myself, actually, because I'll talk a little bit about batteries. So solar batteries. These batteries associated with solar systems is you know, relatively new products to the market. You know, something a long time coming, and I think even someone before my time in solar thinking about it, seems like a natural kind of next step there. Like, we're harnessing the power of the sun. Why don't we hold on to it for a bit so we can use it whenever we need it, right? And that's the idea of a solar battery here. The production from your solar system is coming down into the inverter. Depending on the setup, the inverter is either set up to be compatible with the battery, so that it's directly connected into a separate unit. Actually, I'll grab a picture afterwards when we do Q&A anyways, just to kind of show you what it looks like as well. But yeah, the idea, again, simple concept, is taking that energy from the roof, putting it into the battery, and then you can use that in a couple of different ways. At nighttime, as Colby mentioned earlier, when you kind of stop using the sun or the energy coming off the solar panels, at that point, you can dip into the battery that you've been storing throughout the day. That's kind of narrowing or shortening the time frame that you're using energy that's coming from the grid, right? So just, again, racking up more credits, saving that for later. And then storm response too. So I guess one, well, let's start here. I just noticed that I started talking ahead of the slide, so I want to give you a visual as well. As we see here, the solar panels are producing the excess energy during the day, stored in the battery, and then used at your leisure, really. Again, do that at night, or you can use that in emergency purposes. The one thing I will say is that it's not a generator in the way that generators can last indefinitely, right? You're burning fossil fuels, and you just keep refilling that fossil fuel in order to keep having that energy. Solar batteries at this point, stage in the game, I'll say, have about 10 to 15 kilowatt hours of storage for a single unit. So a lot of setups have multiple batteries in there to account for that. So it's really more set up for emergency purposes. By emergency purpose, I mean like a backup load. So in the case where the power goes down, you want to run the essentials, the necessities. Refrigerator, water pumps, maybe have the internet on, and that you can get certainly through a blackout of a couple of days with that. And I just like to temper that expectation. Just not quite there yet with batteries, but again, they are beneficial in these times when it's cloudy outside and your house is tempted to draw from the grid. You have that backup battery source that you can use to, again, mitigate your pulling from the grid and racking that up. Storms or power outages, like I just said, kind of extended period of time there. And then at night. And again, the idea being that at night, sun goes down, but you're still using energy until, I don't know, some people 7, but 7 to midnight, we'll say. At that point, while you're still using that energy, you can draw that from the battery instead of the grid. And then at night, maybe you're using a little bit. Again, mitigates those overall costs. Just a couple more examples here. A couple of points I did want to make as well. Aesthetics are a big thing, and I say in the conversations I have with most people about installing solar on their home, from our perspective, your home is your castle, and we're here to add to it, to liven it. I'm never going to argue with anybody about aesthetics. So we're really keen on a customized design and something that actually makes sense to meet your energy needs first and foremost. And then obviously something that is going to be appealing to you as well, visually. There are some limitations. They're rectangles. So, there's some angles that we can't quite line up with, but, our design team and our consultants are really, really, really keen on setting something up that you're actually going to enjoy. So, segue to showing off some of our final projects. I'm always a sucker for something with the view. So bottom left there. But, a couple of these are actually our own consultant, Corey Meyerbeck, some of you might have spoken to in with the fall photo here. This is actually his house, which to talk about barriers that we can overcome in an older home. I want to say 150, somewhere around those lines. I can show some other pictures of it too, but we really have to look into the engineering, the structural design of everything, and making sure that this makes sense. Again, for the home, we're not in the business of just slapping panels up on roofs, to start generating energy. This is a commitment that you're an investment, a commitment that you're making, and we'd like to make that too. So, with that, I'll turn it back over to Sean to kind of wrap things up.
Awesome. Thank you, Casey. Thank you, Colby. Really appreciate it. Hopefully you guys can all see the Q&A slide right now. Awesome. So so we're in our Q&A section. We will be answering questions from the chat, from the Q&A function, as well as other questions that came up that were sent in prior to the meeting or tonight's webinar, I should say. So we'll start with our first one. Which is one I've always been, really interested on the residential side. Casey or Colby, could you address how you figure out what type of mounting system you would use for a home? I'm sure there's different characteristics that would play into that.
Yeah, absolutely. It really comes down to the material of the roof. For I would say a traditional asphalt shingle roof. It's really Iron Ridge is the most common that we're using these days. It's a reputable brand name that's been around for quite some time, and we kind of swear by it. So that's for penetrations in the roof. That's kind of our go-to. When it comes to metal roof, there's a couple standing seam or I always forget the name of the other, but there are different attachments, I should say, for both scenarios. There's a clamp that's a non-penetrating attachment, and then there's also a penetrating version as well, which are sealed, obviously. But so yeah, those are kind of most common on slanted roofs. What becomes difficult, slate. On slate roofs, I will say it's not impossible, but slate roof is so beautiful, we have a hard time covering it up. Really, that's my biggest thing. But if it really came down to it, you were really interested, we could certainly look into it. The added costs that come along with that is that it is slate, so as being fragile and temperamental to work around. It takes a lot more precautions, staging setup, and we actually can't stand on the roof, so that's creates a level of difficulty. I think that covers all kind of slanted roofs. The cedar shake, if there's another option, we can do that as well. It's kind of another traditional penetrating racking. For flat roofs, we went over like the penetrating systems and then the kind of ballasted systems there. That's, I'd say, for residential anyways, like, to keep it to that. If you have a flat rubber roof somewhere on the house, or for a multi-unit building, something along those lines, that can be either way. I'd say a ballasted system is probably most common, where a multi-unit building has some kind of like walls around the edge, keeping wind loads and things off like that. But if it's exposed to wind loads, throughout the rest of the day, that's something that would need to be penetrated. Yeah, I think that covers it.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And Frank, feel free to jump in at any time if you have any questions you want to bring forward. I just saw another one in the chat about batteries.
Yeah, and I can go. I can go through those too. I just saw a couple of those pop up. So, yeah, I mean, batteries, useful life is a good way to phrase it. Thank you, Pete. It's case by case, really, when it comes to, I think, because I mentioned about the batteries, where it's not a whole home solution. That's the key. It's not. You shouldn't think of it as something where you're going to be able to handle the whole house for an extended period of time. It's just not quite there yet. So we're really looking at it from a kind of sub panel emergency load perspective. So really comes down to what you put on that panel in order to use and how long you're using it. But again, they're rated for around 10 to 12 kilowatt hours per unit. And I'd say most commonly I've seen lately is about two battery units. So if we're looking at 20 to 24 kilowatt hours in that range.
Great. Could you speak to what you might expect for a lifetime?
Oh, I'm sorry, cut out a bit, Frank. Sean.
Sorry. Let me try that again. Could you speak more to maybe like the lifetime for battery units that are installed with solar systems?
Yeah, I mean, like lifetime, like life expectancy, like
yes.
Yeah. So warranties at this point for batteries, I believe they're 5 to 10 years. I want to say closer to 10 years. But yeah, again, being a kind of relatively new technology, they're not quite to the point of panels and the inverters, where I think almost everything that we are offering now is a 20-year at least warranty. So yeah, life expectancy, again, I'd say about 10 to 15 years is probably what they're anticipating. But again, the warranties are lasting about that time frame, so that's indicative of anything. It's just we haven't seen them yet, right? As far as them being out in use, we haven't quite hit that 10-year point yet. So to be seen. And I have to say, I always sound negative when I'm talking about batteries, and I hate that I have to do that whole disclaimer thing. It's awesome to see that technology is now available. Again, just an infancy in solar industry. that was my first thought, was why isn't there a way to be able to store that, some way to reuse it. So it's great that we've gotten to this point. And this like the Tesla power walls and things like that. Again, just the ratings. I just like to temper the expectations as far as what it is. A lot of time you might hear backup power and think whole home, but yeah, it's a great way to have that assurity and that security for, again, water pump, the refrigerator, have a couple things running, and with that limited load. And we'll do the calculations as we're going through a consultation. We can talk through, what you want to put on that sub panel, and then do calculations to figure out how long that would last. On a limited capacity, again, a couple of days, I think is feasible. So.
And then Casey, thanks for that explanation. Can you just give a quick information on any rebates that are currently available for residential batteries? Because I know that that's a big part of there are a lot of incentives I know for commercial, but what about just for residential customers that are interested in battery backup?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are right now, with most models, I should say, there's the Connected Solutions program, which is through the utility company. That is something where you're basically agreeing to, as part of your connection to the grid. I think it's only a maximum of 2 instances per year where they're able to, in a time of need, draw energy from your battery to contribute to the grid. And then they compensate you for that. So I believe it's about, in a kind of one battery scenario, maybe $500, at least $500 per instance. So, $1,000 a year might be a nice added incentive there. Additionally, with the SMART program, the way that works, it's a per kilowatt hour incentive. So when we first apply, depending on the timing of it, it's kind of first come, first serve. Let's say it's 10 cents per kilowatt hour. With batteries added to the system, there's an added per kilowatt incentive there. There's a couple other adders too. Canopies provide an adder, agriculture, so farmland and things like that. So yeah, and then as far as rebates go, I don't know that I don't know there's anything upfront, but they are also included in, or it's part of the solar project. So would also be included in the 26% federal tax credit as well.
Okay, great. Sorry, I have so many questions on the batteries. I think the last question I had that might be helpful for folks listening in is are there any size restrictions where the solar system that's supplying the battery has to meet a certain threshold of size and kilowatts before it can be available?
So there is, and that's a great question. Thank you, Frank. Sorry, I hadn't hit it myself. There is a system kind of minimum size of, I believe it would be about 6 kilowatts. It depends. The size of the inverter is really the key there in a solar edge system, anyways. It's 7,600 kilowatts. So again, yeah, about 6 kilowatts to 6.5 kilowatts is probably around the minimum, and that's again to ensure that there's enough, to put it into simpler terms, enough juice, enough energy to keep that going, and also do its job in pumping out to the grid and back out to your house. So yeah, that would be good.
I'll jump in with another question.
Yeah.
Just shifting gears. So could you talk about maybe different financing options? We got a question asking about leasing panels. I think part of this might lend to more in-depth discussion of like the different incentives that are available, but then also one of the things we haven't really talked about yet is the power purchase agreement option as well.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, so the traditionally, right, should have had a slide on that. There's 2 real kind of paths go, adopting solar energy, right? Reason I probably hadn't hit on it, I always speak in the ownership model. Colby had touched on it a little bit earlier in that, to kind of receive the benefits of all those incentives, you'd be purchasing the system and owning the system yourself. That could be through kind of cash purchase or your own savings. That could be through a loan, or kind of non-traditional loans, like home equity loans, things of that nature also kind of in play for that as well. The other options are through a PPA or power purchase agreement and a lease agreement. They're very, very similar in that the kind of basic idea is that you're agreeing to have a company or third party install a system on your roof. And with that, you are going to be essentially purchasing the energy you need from the solar array, so the owner of the solar array. The benefit is that it's at a great discount. I believe running some examples earlier is about like 50% savings from like the average utility rate. So again, the benefit is you're running off that clean energy. You've made it possible for that clean energy to be generated in the world. And then you are in return receiving a discounted electric bill in the form of that, roughly, I'll say 50% savings, somewhere in that range. Kind of key differences there. So with ownership, clearly, you own that outright. So when you turn around selling the property or changing hands of the property, things of that nature, it's part of the house. It's you're kind of selling that along with it. With the power purchase agreement or lease, you don't own the system, so you're locked into a lengthy contract, usually around 25 years. And in that point, you're kind of obligated to be paying that discounted rate to that company for that time. There are options of getting out of kind of removing yourself or sort of ending that. Usually buyout options where you're kind of purchasing the system at fair market rate at that time. And that way you're then from there on, you own the system and you're not be paying that discounted energy. You'll just be reaping all of the benefits going right to the utility. And then, so I think that covers it. Sorry, I thought I had another topic. So those are the kind of key distinctions there. And we do offer both. I speak a lot of times in that ownership model, but it is definitely a good option. Nonprofits, larger communities, homeowner associations where it's a single building, multi-unit buildings along those lines. It's definitely a viable option in a lot of scenarios. Not everybody's in the position to make that full out investment or have the added monthly payment, but still taking advantage of the energy there. So definitely happy to kind of walk anybody through both.
Awesome.
I don't know if you guys had other ones. I saw one, another question here. What does each solar panel weigh? The dimensions of each panel. So weight's a good question. I should pull up a data sheet on there, but they're roughly 3 feet by 5.5 feet. There's some slight variations between models, but the LG and the Hanwha panels that were offered there are just that, are right around that 3 feet by 5.5. I saw something in the chat too. I don't know if I missed that topic.
Yeah, I think there was one there just asking about the different panels and inverters and maybe potential trade-offs. Maybe you can even talk about if customers have options.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to answer. I'm going to try to open a couple pictures so I can share in the meantime too. But great question. So as part of the program here, there's two kind of key options or two basic options. The solar edge inverter, which we saw a picture of earlier, and then end-phase micro inverters. The difference is, so if you see, actually, I will share my screen. Oh, no, not yet. With the solar edge inverters, which is a string inverter, just like it sounds, multiple panels are on one string. So in some ways, the production of one compared to the one next to it might have some impact either way. Right? If one's shaded, maybe the whole line gets a little bit less energy. With micro inverters, each individual panel has basically an inverter on it. So that's able to take all of the energy or monitor all of the energy, report back to the central hub, and then again, kind of using the example earlier, reacts independently to shading and things of that nature. So shading one might not necessarily impact the other. The trade-offs in each, I kind of talked about that there. I'd say they're recommended more in a kind of partially shaded scenario. Again, like I talked using the example earlier. So it just helps kind of with the overall production of things. There's an added cost with microinverters. So there's the trade-off right there, right? Our kind of standard offer or base price is including that solar edge inverter. Microinverter is just I think 20-cent adder per kilowatt. And then as far as the panels go, we have a Hanwha Q cell panel, which is a 320 watt, 340 watt, excuse me. And then there are two LG panels, 365 and 395 watt. A little bit of an added cost for the LG panels as they're bigger and also a different brand make. But, and again, it really, I'd say we use them based on what makes sense for the situation. I always like to describe us as kind of brand agnostic. We're really not tied to one brand or manufacturer over the other. It's what makes sense for your situation, right? You know, if you have I want to say smaller, because nobody's electric bill is smaller these days. If you have on the smaller end of the scale electric bill and don't need as large of a system to offset that, then you might be able to take advantage or achieve that with the smaller panels and the smaller inverter. So, you know, might be able to get that right off the bat. If you have a larger electric bill, you know, certainly we're going to need to cover more. So if there's the ability to do that by upgrading the panels in a small space to that 395 watt, then, you know, might take advantage of that again with the goal of offsetting that electric bill. You know, we try to be transparent with that, and you know, I guess if there were, yeah, no, I think that's fine. Trying to find the right panel for the situation, the right equipment for the situation, and we're open to both, right? We make I guess a suggestion or a proposal based on our engineering and looking at the shading analysis, looking at the production analysis, and trying to determine what's going to produce the most for you. But we're always, you know, happy to kind of meet in the middle. Again, like I said earlier, it is your castle, so you know, we want to find what makes the most sense for the situation.
Right, thanks, Casey. So we just got a really good question on what the average cost is to buy and install a solar system. So with this one, I want to preface, assuming that it has, you know, no shading issues and it's a decent orientation that would be suitable for solar. And let's just say that the house has, I don't know, 1,800 square feet. That's the footprint of the house, and it's a rooftop system. So if you could give a sort of ballpark of that, and let's say it's, I don't know, 8 kW system.
All right, that's fair.
In that range.
I was going to say, all right, so what it's going to come down to is what we need to offset, right? So I was going to ask for an electric bill, but we don't have time for that, right? So that's fine. 8 kilowatt system, we roughly in the ballpark, again, with some of those variations on you know, equipment and things. And I see you noted that, Pete, so thank you for understanding. It's a somewhere probably 25,000, maybe to 15,000. Yeah, depending on the types of panels used, that's probably a little wider of a range, but yeah, I guess assuming that scenario where it's kind of perfectly aligned and things like that, and you're going to get that most production, yeah, I think that's a fair ballpark.
And Casey, what about the upfront discounts? So the 26% tax credit, assuming that you get all of that stuff, what would be the first year sticker price if you subtract those? Because a big part of it is taking advantage and locking in those incentives so that you don't pay sticker price. In that situation, what do you think that would be for the first year? Just the net cost.
Yeah, and that's a great question too. And I'm sorry that I have the face looking at the camera like this, but I wanted to find the file so that I could share an example of that. So this is going to be a little bit, I don't know, wait, actually, let me take a moment to find an actual proposal there. Really, when it comes down to that first one up front, so there's the upfront savings you're going to see is on the electric bill. Like that's the right off the gate, right? It's the offset. As far as the sort of tangible incentive, usually again, SMART is monthly over 10 years. So after the first couple months of operating, that's when you're going to see the first cash incentive. And again, use direct deposit or something of that nature set up. No, here we go. Okay. Sorry for the delay. See my screen here. So with this, you see actually, hey, this is a great example, 8 kilowatt system, right? So 22,000 is what this ended up costing here right at the gate, right? The federal tax credit around 5,847. This is this example is New Hampshire, so they're not we where I'm sitting right now do not have as good of incentives as we do in Massachusetts. So really great to take advantage of the state essentially paying you to go solar. There's only the federal tax credit here, so that $5,000 netting out to the 16. What we provided in our proposal is this cash flow here, so you can see that upfront cost noted, and then in this first year we show the offset electric bill. So that's estimated what you're saving from not paying the utility bill, the federal tax credit, and then that impact to your cash flow. In the SMART example, which I will try to find in the meantime as well, that would have, again, an additional, usually roughly $150, $250 a month, depending on the generation. So that's something that you would see in addition to that. Yeah, I'll try to find it in the meantime, but I'm horrible at trying to find something and talking at the same time.
No, awesome. We appreciate it, Casey. I know that's a specific one. It's sort of a curveball, but I know that that's a big part of the calculus that goes into buying the system. So
yeah,
I appreciate that. And then I know we only have a few more minutes, but I think another follow-up on that is I know a big part of installing solar, it's making sure that you hopefully get your electricity bills to zero. So I know that you always instruct customers to give you guys your electricity bills going through a year. You just explain that process of, how you guys look at that to size the, to look at what systems to put on. That'd be great to learn about.
No, absolutely. No, it's a great question. So yeah, we're always looking at things from an annual perspective. Where we can, the calculations makes it a little simpler when you're working with the same set of data for one, but we're looking at, because there's an arc, typically, obviously, from a production standpoint, we get more sun during the summer than we do during the winter, right? So your production arc is going to be during the middle of the year, right? Depending on whether you use like electric heat or something along those lines, right? You may use more electricity in the winter, so you have the peak offset then, or a pool and things of that nature, and air conditioning where you're using during the summer, so maybe you have a summer peak, right? Regardless of that, that's why we look at it from the annual perspective, because we want to be able to generate over the course of that year enough to offset that entire usage, right? At least, and then build in a little bit for insulation, because utility rates have been escalating consistently since I've been paying attention. So we're looking at it from the annual perspective to make sure that over the course of the year, where maybe during the, let's say, during the summer where you're generating more and not using as much, you might be racking up some more credits that have stashed on your electric bill. And then come time during the winter where you might peak above a little bit and use more than you generated, that's where you can take advantage of those credits. And again, with the engineering and sort of calculations that we go into with your estimate, we're making sure that nets out, at least nets out.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Casey. Looks like we have a few more minutes. Yeah, I have a couple more, but Sean, do you have any other things on your minds that you'd like to ask?
No, I think I appreciate the conversation so far. I think we've gone into a bunch of different directions, which is awesome. I'd say, if we want to get in maybe like one or two more questions before we wrap up, that would be
I think maybe one other thing that we, am I still, nope, okay. One other thing that we might be able to talk about too, I just kind of maybe set the expectations for kind of what the estimate process is like. And, you know, it's easy to find out. You know, we've talked a lot about the intricacies, but, you know, if you're really interested, what it comes down to is really just reaching out to us. You know, go through the website there. Obviously, feel free to contact us directly as well. Everybody in the 4 towns is eligible for this pricing. So we're, you know, just based on your address, we'll be able to, you're eligible. And really it starts with that conversation. You know, we just want to, you know, have a good understanding of how much you're using. You know, sending the electric bill is a nice, easy way of doing that. You know, PDF, snap a picture. I'll give you my cell phone number. You can text it to me, you know, whatever makes it easy that way. And then we're going to go through the satellite imagery. We can start there and get a, you know, we'll confirm we're looking at the right roof. And with our design tools, able to pretty accurately measure what size of the solar system we're going to be able to put on that. So that's our first pass of analysis, along with some shading to understand, you know, how much sun access you actually have. Right? So at that point, we'll see, really want to determine if it's enough, right? It's not one size fits all, and unfortunately, it's not for everybody's roof or situation, right? If it's something where we're not going to be able to generate enough to make it viable for you, then we're going to be upfront and honest about that. You know, there's other options. Community solar is one. There's other ways to take advantage of that. But you know, we want to be transparent and make sure that you understand. You know, awesome that you want to make that investment, but really wouldn't recommend it. You just wouldn't be viable for you financially, right? But anyway, so we'll do that analysis as soon as we can. We'll put together that proposal, pricing, and then we send it to you ahead of time, but usually set up some time to kind of talk through that. You know, explain the kind of ins and outs of the system, talk over the kind of details of the pricing. You know, there's kind of obviously the price of the panels and the inverter and the equipment's one thing, but there are other factors like the type of roof we talked about, right? With a metal roof, there's additional equipment involved, so there might be an added cost for that. Ground mount, you know, how long do you have to dig or trench for, right? The type of racking that we're using. So there's a couple of different things that go into that. So we want to be able to talk through that and make sure I understand kind of the big picture. And then from there, you know, I like to say that we're not even low pressure, but no pressure. You know, I really instruct my guys to say, you know, I want you guys to be you know, completely comfortable with whatever decision that you're about to make, whether it's going with us, whether it's going with another installer. You know, we want you to understand the ins and outs and have answers to all of your questions before jumping into it. So if you do get any of that, definitely let me know. I'll straighten them out. But really, we want to make sure that you have all of your questions answered and know what you're getting for your house.
Awesome. And if I could, just one last question, maybe like a 15-second answer before we wrap up.
Oh,
This is your challenge for the night.
try to win it.
So great question. Could you talk about how snow affects the power generation of panels?
Yeah, absolutely. So it stops it in short. That would be my 3-second answer. But it's really not as big of an impact as you might think it is. It definitely, if there's snow, you know, if you have a couple feet of snow and everything's covered, like you're not going to generate any energy. That I will say that. I will say, so it's always sliding off of the panels before anything else, right? So it's really no resistance there to get off. And it's the first thing to melt as well. I mean, as soon as the sun comes out and those things are kind of getting to work, there's a little bit of heat there, which is melting everything off. So not as big of an issue as you might think. And I will also say, definitely don't recommend kind of shoveling them off or anything like that. You know, don't want messing with any equipment or anything. It honestly will melt before everything else. So let it do its thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Casey and Colby. We'll turn it over to Frank to close out. And just want to thank everyone again.
All right, echoing Sean's last comments. Thank you, Casey and Colby, for giving us this great presentation, answering our questions, and talking about what you guys do best. So if anyone has any more questions, you reached any, I was just gonna say, Sean was sustainability coordinator for City of Framingham, Natick, sustainability coordinator for Holliston, Jillian Wilson Martin, sustainability director for Natick. And my name is Frank Nakashian. I'm the sustainability coordinator for Ashland. And you can go to the Metrowest Solar and Clean Heat Challenge website, sign for a site assessment, or provide a comment to be put in touch with the volunteer for questions, any of that other information. So, and thank you for listening in and spending this nice Thursday night with us. And this presentation will be recorded and hopefully we'll post it on the website. So yeah, thank you again for listening in, and hope everyone has a great night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Sign up for a no-cost assessment.